Hello, everyone, and welcome to Art of Impact, a podcast where we interview some of the most accomplished and interesting entrepreneurs and professionals from around the world. I think a goal we want to achieve with this podcast is to show how nonlinear, paths from university until all the way to career or ventures, how nonlinear these paths are and how all of these people that we're interviewing started in a similar position to where most students are right now, uncertainty. Today on the podcast, we have Derrick Fung, who is the CEO and co-founder of Drop, a mobile rewards app where consumers can earn points for everyday spending on top of their existing debit and credit cards. Drop has ranked in the top 3 in the App Store in both Canada and the US and currently boasts over 3 million users. Derrick began his career in finance, specifically in sales and trading in Toronto and New York, at various investment banks, including Merrill Lynch and CIBC Capital Markets. Derrick was also named in 2014 to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list in music alongside people like Avicii, Lady Gaga, and Drake. We sit down here with Derrick for around a 40-minute chat and talk to him about his experiences, his journey, and his insights.
Yeah, so the first thing we'd like to discuss that we found really interesting was in high school, you founded this really cool product called Quality Sheet Music. Can you tell us a bit more about that and who built the product and what motivated you?
So I built it. It was open sourced community software called PHP Nuke. So I didn't build it from scratch, but it's kind of like a WordPress, or PHP BB forum type of platform. And so the idea was back then, believe it or not, Yahoo is one of the most popular internet destinations for search, for games. And Yahoo had they still do, but it was called Yahoo Groups. And you can go in and you can essentially, communicate with people, post photos, and it was, the first iteration of an online community. And so I joined a Yahoo group where the owner of it had a bunch of sheet music. So it was like JPEGs, GIFs, and you just download it, print it, and play it. And I said to myself, there must be a better way to distribute this sheet music beyond just the Yahoo group. So then I thought about different couple concepts. One was just building a site from scratch with HTML. And the second was, hey, there's existing open source communities where you can just kind of plug it in. There's a forum, there's a download section, and that's what I did. And so bought the domain. I think that was the first ever .com domain I've ever bought. I think it was like $20 or something, which was for me back then, good amount of money. And then sorry, let me just turn off my phone here. And then, I just launched it, and then I learned SEO. I learned how to, put in code within your website to get better Google ranking. And, next thing led to another, and it just really quickly became a pretty big destination. I still meet people till today who, when I talk about it, they're like, yeah, I used that website back in the day, which is pretty cool, which is pretty awesome, so.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And were you involved a lot with music in general back in high school? Because reading up on your profile, there's a lot of music sprinkled into.
Yeah, I'm involved. I've been playing since I was 4 years old, playing piano. Yeah.
Wow.
And then competing since I was 6 years old at the Royal Conservatory of Music. And so I learned. I grew up playing piano, learned guitar, can play, bass guitar, acoustic, electric, piano, vocals, and a little bit of drums. So kind of play a bit of everything. I'm involved with the Faculty of Music at U of T. I'm on the advisory council. I now officially have a graduate scholarship as well, focused on music and mental health. So I've been very involved, since leaving school. My last company was in the music industry. Drop isn't in the music industry anymore, but I'm still very involved, very, very involved. And I co-chair Canadian Music Week here in Canada. as well in 2014, I believe. So I've been pretty involved in the music industry.
Do you feel like if you're not doing music, like at any point of time, like something is missing?
Yeah, I mean, I just love live concerts, shows, playing, listening. It's been a big part of my upbringing and my adult career. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so what I wanted to ask you about as well, like, relating to your days in high school. So you studied finance and econ and business administration program at U of T, is that correct?
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, how this, like the venture you started in high school and scaled, and your interest in music, how that kind of like filtered into, studying business at university.
Yeah, so
because then again, like I think around that time, it was near the financial crisis as well. So
yeah.
Did that affect any decisions by the way? Because like I would imagine it could.
Oh yeah. So I was in high school. I was very entrepreneurial. So I had my couple websites that I was making pretty good money on. Like you could argue, close to a average wage annual salary off my website, just on the advertising on my website. I then had an eBay business where I was a power seller on eBay. I had, what else?
What do you mean power seller?
To hit power seller status, you need, I think, something like 2,000 transactions that have gone through your eBay account. So I've sold 2,000 items on eBay, and so got the power seller status. I was just very entrepreneurial, and then in high school, I really enjoyed all my business classes. So like economics, business. Didn't do too well in the science. I mean, I did okay in some of the sciences, but it was really the business courses that I really enjoyed. I also really enjoyed, I remember, computer graphics, like graphic arts or something, I think was the name of the class back in high school. I went to York Mills Collegiate up in North York for high school. So after that, I just said to myself, hey, I think this business thing is pretty cool. UT Scarborough had the co-op program, which allowed you to actually do work as well. And I think it wasn't super easy to get into. Like the co-op program itself, I think it was like 87% average to get in. And so it was, really aimed for that one and got in. And I did, I think 4 or 5 co-ops. The last 2, I actually went out and searched for myself, but worked at a bunch of really cool places and graduated during the financial collapse, although you could argue this week, as we are currently recording this, I don't know if you've been following the stock market with the coronavirus, but yeah, it's pretty close, not too far away, which is pretty scary. But that's when I graduated, and this time versus the financial collapse is very different. Obviously. Back then, like fundamental part of the economy was falling apart, and so that's when I graduated. And after things really recuperated from the financial collapse, things were just very different. And I think even when you look at the financial industry right now, it's still very different, very very different. Not as a go-to spot for new grads to go to. So.
Yeah, because like from where we're sitting in university, we know like Angad is studying in the Rotman program, for example. A lot of people still like look at like investment banking or just working at financial institutions as sort of this go-to destination. So like was like after the financial crisis, like did it change dramatically, like how people were looking at finance, like from your circle at least?
Totally. I mean, I remember when I was recruiting, the banks all had recruitment sessions, did the whole kind of dog and pony show, but at the end they didn't hire anyone or only hired back their summer analysts to join full time. I'd say that after that, like it's completely changed. The trading floor, for example, where I started my job, the group I was in was maybe 8 people. Now I heard it's 2. So and these are traders that are now replaced with computers. I'd also say that another interesting one is, for example, if you look at some of the top MBA programs in the U.S., Stanford, in the class of 250 MBA grads, I believe it's now only literally under 10 will go into sell-side finance, like investment banking, like 10 out of like 200 something people. So it's completely changed. I'd say, startups since then has been the really awesome, great place to be, whether you're starting your own company or joining a startup. It's cheaper than ever before to start a company. There's more money out there. More and more investors are backing, because there's so much more money, they're backing companies earlier on. Before, the thought of raising money off of a PowerPoint deck was crazy, but now a lot of second, third time entrepreneurs are able to do that. So it's the world has really changed in the last decade.
Yeah, do you think it's like better now that startups can get funded like drastically so early in their life cycle?
It's a good and bad thing. I think you want to promote promote and reinforce the right type of things. Yeah. And I think, promoting the fact that, anyone can raise money off a deck, I don't think is the right thing. You want to be thoughtful about how you start your company. You want to be thoughtful around the market you're going after and the business. And I think, just having a deck isn't necessarily mean you're being super thoughtful. I think a lot of entrepreneurs who, they just start building because they believe in it so much. I think is more, for an investor that's just more appealing because, hey, they just did it. They just quit their job and did it. And so I think it's a good and bad.
Regarding the views towards, let's say, finance and tech changing, we can see that even at U of T with now the hatchery, we have various incubator programs in university that sort of allow us to work over the summer, and they'll fund you, and it's a pretty good program.
Yeah.
So when you did join UT Scarborough and you're working at all these really prestigious firms, did your entrepreneurial endeavors go on hold, or were you still
I was
working
still always
on
working
cool
on stuff on the side. Like my first co-op was at Microsoft, and I remember I would commute from Scarborough to Mississauga. Their office was in Mississauga, and then back then I had to take public transit, and then I eventually figured out a carpool situation. But then public transit, I'd have to wake up at 4 a.m., I remember, to then take like the TTC to Scarborough Town Centre, and then take the GO bus to Yorkdale, and then get off and take another GO bus from Yorkdale to Meadowvale Road, which is, so it was like a 3 to 4 hour commute pretty much. And then I remember after work, I would go back to campus to, I was involved in a bunch of like student clubs, and so I was doing that, and then I still had my businesses on the side when I was, at Microsoft, for example. So throughout university, I was always like either thinking of businesses or like operating businesses, and so it's always been part of me in a pretty big way.
And so like you're saying, that was a big part of your career in life for the entirety of undergrad, from high school up until that point. So how did that, channel into your decision to, after graduating from U of T, go out and look for a full-time job rather than, like thinking about working on your venture full-time rather?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a venture idea big enough yet to go full-time after school. They were all side projects, and I wanted to, and honestly, at one point, I almost had to because I couldn't get a job. So I remember I delayed my graduation 8 months. I recruited I probably had something like, and this is gonna make me sound like an absolute failure, but 10 final round interviews. It was most of the Canadian banks, big management consulting firms, close to 10 final round interviews, and got one offer, from one of the banks, but not for the job I wanted. So I remember, I remember not taking it. And it was, I think I remember, if I remember correctly, it was, pretty good salary, something like $60,000 out of school. It was an asset management arm of one of the big banks, but I wanted to work on the trading floor. And I remember getting the offer, and I essentially turned it down. They're like, what? And I said, you know what? I don't think I'm going to take this. And they're like, what are you going to do then? And I'm like, I'm going to probably delay my graduation and try again. So, yeah, this was probably December, and then I said, you know what? I'm going to go back out in January and start looking again. But I had to essentially they only allowed me, U of T, only had summer internship opportunities. So not only did I delay graduation to look for a job, the job would be a summer intern job. Okay. So I went through the gamut again. It was all of January. I recruited, and here's where here's the kicker. A lot of it was the same recruiters, and they would see my resume again, and they'd be like, what? And so it's now February, and I saw, this is a blessing in disguise, because Merrill Lynch was going through all that stuff. They had not yet, merged with Bank of America, but because they were going through all that stuff, they posted late. So they posted in February, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to apply. So typically, I believe a big bank would see something like 2,500 applications and hire like a couple. They saw probably 1,000, so I was lucky. That was like a smaller pool. But the other part that was interesting is they say it's not what you know, it's who you know. My old boss at BNP Paribas was at Merrill Lynch before, and called them up and said, hey, you got to hire this guy. And so that happened. I joined Merrill Lynch. And then shortly after they collapsed, and then which is another story in itself. And then I spent the summer there, and then I'm just bad luck. And at the end of the summer, they said we can't hire. Like we've collapsed. So they go out again to look full time again in September of 2010. And then I interviewed everywhere again. And I was lucky enough this time around to get more offers, and one of them being CIBC. And I said to them, I will take this if you give me, I want to be a trader. And then they gave me an opportunity to trade foreign exchange. And so that's how it all started. Awesome. Yeah.
And was it a big relief?
It was crazy, but what's even crazier is a year and 8 months into it, I quit.
Yeah. And
started a company. started a company. So that's with no real full-time experience. Moved back home with my parents in Scarborough. Left downtown with an idea, no funding, and just started in my living room, and that's how my first company began.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the story behind getting your jobs it's really inspirational. I don't think anyone would try so hard to get something like they really want. And I want to know why exactly did you want to do trading? I think risk is one commonality between entrepreneurship and trading. So
I love the risk. I love risk taking. I loved and I still trade today myself, and I still follow the markets pretty closely. I'd say I just loved. First, I think I was inspired through. I remember in high school, there was a stock trading simulation, both high school and in university. And I was always just very fascinated about the stock market, kind of figuring out how it all works. And because it moves so fast, I really enjoyed that. And then during university, everyone talks about investment banking and the capital markets. And for me, it was just always very fascinating. And I just followed, and I was just all the money I made for my business endeavors, I invested. I either went on eBay and bought and sold stuff, or I put the money into the stock market. When I was probably 20 years old, I had a private banker. I remember at one of the big banks who taught me about the markets, and I remember, was it 20, 21, 20? Yeah, and that was the collapse, the first financial collapse. And I remember freaking out. I remember selling stuff. Knowing what I know now, if I had just held on, so you learn a lot about the stock market. Anyone's listening right now freaking out about the stock market, don't sell, hold, it's a long-term, it's a long game. But I'd say that that's how I got interested, and I think that it's just very fast-paced and very fun.
Yeah, that's pretty smart that you invested your money while you were in university. I feel like a lot of people always think about it, but they don't know how to get started. When they're in university, do you think more people should start investing in university?
I think for sure. I mean, I think it just kind of forces you to follow the news as well, which is great.
Yeah.
I think it's not really that complex. You don't have to do anything too complex. Just my strategy even now is investing in companies I personally use and believe in. They say just put your money in an ETF and whatever and just leave it. And for me, I just I believe in, I'm pretty forward-thinking person, and I believe in a lot of the companies I personally use or see myself using. So I think I don't think it's a bad thing, and I don't think you need a lot of money, especially in today's day and age when you have all these new fintech companies popping up that allow you to invest in fractional shares of companies. There's no excuse why you shouldn't start investing or thinking about it.
Yeah.
Regarding risk, I'd want to know, so I read this Quora article that you'd written about 25 things I've learned by the time I turned 25, and one thing you talk about is how when you're young, you should take lots of risk. I want to know, what are your views on risk, especially as they apply to young people, and what do most young people get wrong about risk?
So I'm gonna use a stock market analogy. I'm gonna use a stock market analogy because I think it's actually quite relevant, right? So look at your time horizon as a human, as a whether it's your working life. Let's say even your working life. Let's say right now you're probably in your 20s, you're in school, you retire when you're 65, and that's 45 years where there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to happen in 45 years. And the reason why, I'm not in my 20s anymore, but hey, if the stock market tanks, I have 30-something years for it to recover. And will the stock market recover in 35 years? Probably. So same thing, when you're young, you try something, you fail, what do you have to lose? And you try again and you fail, what do you have to lose? And even if each successive period is 3-4 years, you do it 3 times, that's only a decade. And if you do it when you're in school, you come out and you're like 30 and you're laughing. You're like, wow, I'm still only 30. But if you wait, the longer you wait, the harder it gets, the more and higher the opportunity cost. The more I'd say, I think you have to be a bit crazy to start companies and to just leave it all behind. And I do think the older you are, the more you see, the more risk adverse you'll become, and the more you have to lose. So that's why I think taking risks early is so critical. For me, for example, saw the whole stock market. I started investing in 2007-8, freaked out, sold. Over the next decade, I just watched and I started getting back into the stock market. I was at one point pretty burned. I was like, oh, I don't know if I'll ever invest again. But then I started dabbling, and then I started thinking more long term, and then I started thinking just more, more patient, being more patient, and this week was the largest drop in the Dow Jones since the financial crisis. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, looking at it very differently. I'm buying like, insurance. So like put options, but at the same time, I'm waiting for the dip. Like I'm waiting for the bottom and I'm just going to start buying. And I think I've learned, and I think as an entrepreneur, same thing. My last company could barely raise money. It was after a very tough market, the music industry. Made probably thousands of mistakes. This time around, I'm probably making, maybe dozens of mistakes and not hundreds or thousands. And so the only way to, really get to this point is to start early and to start learning early.
Yeah, I really like this mentality. And like, did you use that mentality to sort of like quit your job and start your next company, Tunizi?
So Tunizi, I just quit. I just kind of quit. I don't know how else to. I wasn't really happy. Back then, it's been that long. 10 years ago, the trading floor was very different. The environment was very different. As a junior, as an analyst.
Like I'm wondering, was it everything you sort of envisioned, like as a
it
trader?
It was. Having worked in it, if you've seen Wolf of Wall Street, that was kind of. That was in the 80s, so it wasn't like that crazy. But it's since changed a ton since over the last decade. But it was very intense. It was very fast moving, which was all super awesome. But I remember getting people their coffee and their lunch, and just asking myself, is this what I want to do for the next couple of years, or do I want to start a company and have more impact and take a risk, and if not now, like when? And so it was a great learning opportunity. I'd say, if anything, I built really thick skin and learned a lot. But I think ultimately starting a company, you learn even more.
And like I'm sure, like as you iterate through starting companies, like you realize like the habits, like the bad habits you developed, like with the previous company, for example. So like one important habit of starting up a company is like picking the right co-founders.
Yes.
So like I'm wondering how you went about that. Like for Tunizi, for example, like was your co-founder your friend, or did you know him before? How did that work?
Yeah. So Brandon, I knew him in school. So I knew he's a smart guy. We would just start randomly talking about ideas during university, and I was that crazy guy that would just like keep
one idea per week,
just like one idea, and just be like, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think about that? What do you think about this? And I remember he'd just be like, hey, I got a job, I gotta pay like my rent and things, and I'm like, hey, but what about this idea? What about that? And it just got to a point, I think I was just so annoying, that he was like, okay, fine. And then I like raised a little bit of money. He's like, okay, fine. There's a little bit of money. I think it was like $100,000 or something. And then we won this U of T NBTC competition. And then he was like, okay, fine, I'll quit my job. And so we did it for about a year and a half, and then sold it to a company in the US that then went public that year, IPO'd. So it was pretty wild story. And then with Drop, my brother's one of the co-founders. He was our first engineer at Tunizi. As a co-op student. He did his second co-op, or was it his second or third co-op from Waterloo at Tunizi. And so, and we started in the living room. So I remember my parents would like wake up and they're like, "What is going on? Like you quit your 6-figure Bay Street job. You're doing a co-op with this guy. You're personally paying out of your pocket for this guy's salary. Like, okay." So that was kind of how that all started. And he's now our CTO here at Drop, and I have another co-founder who did some designs for Tunizi. I think he was Cameron is never went to university. He's just been designing. I think I met him at Tunizi. He was 17 years old, and he was designing for us. And he's had multiple offers to go to the big tech companies like Shopify's, but we all got together. I've never met him in person either. So I never met him in person. He lived in Muskoka. I said, hey, we should start a company. He showed up one day, and I said, hey, great to meet you in person. Are you ready to start a company? He's like, okay. And then my brother was in San Francisco. I'm like, hey, you ready? And he's like, well, if you can raise some money, I'll quit my job in San Francisco and move back. And we raised a pre-seed round of $750,000 US, and just got going.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a crazy story, honestly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how is it working with your brother?
It's great.
On this level, yeah.
We're very different. Like he's engineer. I'm a business person. We live together for. We still live together. But he's now kind of living between two places. But we live together for pretty much the whole duration of Drop. So it's been 4.5 years that we live together, work together. So it's been good. I mean, it's important that we're very complementary and different people.
Regarding co-founders, do you think? So I'm a business student, and I've always wondered if I'm not, let's say, technically capable to build an MVP. Do I need to find a technical co-founder, or should I learn the skills myself? And how did you do it at Toon?
We believe it or not, we moonlighted at first. So I would work from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. on the trading floor, and then hop on calls with our developers in India at like midnight. So to get started, and then we quit, and then my brother, we needed someone to code. So like my brother, we because we didn't raise a lot of money, we could only afford co-op students. So I remember we interviewed co-op students in Waterloo, and leveraged some of my brother's friends to help build the first prototype. So that's how it all kind of started. Neither Brandon and I could code. So Brandon now is a VP and GM at Shopify. Manages a team of probably hundreds of people. So he's become very successful on the product side. So I'd say if you don't know how to code, learning product is very important. Could be another interesting way to add value beyond business. And there's courses you can take at BrainStation or online around how to be a good product manager. And that's actually what I would do if I could do it all over again. My background is sales. I focus on sales, but becoming a good product manager is also something that I think could be an interesting way to add value without knowing how to code.
And yeah, one thing I wanted to ask you about is right now, you're in a much different position than you were say in undergrad. But how do you look at the future now? 5 years ahead. How do you think about it or go about thinking about that process? Because when you're in undergrad, I can imagine the way you think about the future is much different.
How do I think about the future for what?
For yourself, not necessarily your company.
Yeah, I'd say that one, I can't see myself doing anything else but building companies. I think whether it's myself independently building a company, or who knows, with Drop, there's still a lot to do. But if a big company says, hey, love what you've done, here's unlimited resources, come join us and build. So whatever, wherever, however, I think company building is, the only thing I'd see myself doing. I do angel investing on the side, but I'd say I have a lot more runway to continue to build companies. I'd say that knowing what I know now, the advice I often give to newer entrepreneurs or young people is, it's hard no matter what. If I said to you, hey, go out, here's $1,000, go build a hot dog stand business, or hey, go try to build the next Google, it's gonna be hard for both. There's gonna be ups and downs, and hard in different ways. And I think think big. And when I think about if and when I were to build a company again down the road, not if, more of a when. And I think it's gonna be something massive, big. And when I say that, things like space travel, extending human life, climate change. I think mental health, like these are going to be the biggest challenges of our generation of the next 1 or 2 decades. And I think we need more entrepreneurs who are going to come out and really think and dream that big. Because if not, literally, it's not like it's literally like a mankind problem where if we don't treat this planet and if we don't think about the world the right way, will this planet exist? Will there be a dark age? Will there be a world with we run out of food, run out of water? Like I think these are the biggest problems of the next couple of decades, and I think it'll be very important for entrepreneurs, whether you're a first-time entrepreneur or a second, third-time entrepreneur, to go that big, because without that, big thinking, it leaves the next generations in a very tough spot. So I think, that's how I've been thinking about things.
It's a really cool way to think about it, because like for entrepreneurs who are not entrepreneurs yet, they need to think about, they need to acknowledge that, okay, this field might be saturated, but they need to also realize that like what I do in this field, like climate change or mental health, like can have the opportunity to shape that field for the long run. And like it's a mankind issue, like you said.
Yeah, totally.
And regarding solving hard problems, and even at Drop, I'm sure you've probably had to work extremely hard. I'd want to know, what are your views on work-life balance? Because I was recently reading this tweet storm by the Shopify CEO who was talking about how he gets home to work by 5:30, how he rarely works over 40 hours a week. And so I'd want to know, what are your views on work-life balance?
I think that's BS, what he's saying. I think it's bullshit. If you ask him, hey, how did you spend your first 5 years, 8 years? Of course you're a billionaire and you have a team of 5,000 people now. Of course you can go home at 5 p.m. And I recently spoke about this at TechTO in City Hall. My final kind of closing statement and view on this is, and just entrepreneurship is, the quote I often use is no one is coming to save you. And that quote comes from war, from like the Navy SEALs. When you're in battle, no one's coming to save you. Like you're on your own. You're in the trenches. There's no backup coming for you. No one's gonna tell you what to do. No one's gonna tell you to get the hell out of there when you're surrounded by the enemy forces and like no one. And I think this is where there's too much noise out there. There's a lot of just clickbaity stuff. And I think that what he said is clickbait, because you then read another article which says Elon Musk is sleeping on the factory floor every night and has not taken vacation, which is also kind of BS. Is take vacation. And so my words of wisdom is do what you gotta do. Like just if you gotta pull an all-nighter, pull an all-nighter. If you're stressed out and need a day off, take a day off. It's a marathon. There's also articles like, successful people wake up at 4 a.m. And there's also other articles that say, the best entrepreneurs are night owls and wake up late. There's just a lot of just noise out there. And I think do what you got to do, and no one's coming to save you. Your startup is 100% your responsibility. That's what makes it the hardest, but also most fulfilling, but, the hardest job. And also, I think the most loneliest job, because no one's going to tell you what to do. There's no playbook. If you succeed, it's a team effort. But if you fail, it's your fault. So, I think at the end of the day, and I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but I think it's important for everyone to recognize that, it's just don't listen to others. Just do what you got to do.
It's tough life. Seems like it. And yeah, so I think thanks so much for joining us today and making the time to speak to us. We
Awesome.
had a lot of fun talking to you.
Cool.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Art of Impact is co-hosted by myself, Talal Fahoun, and Angad Erneja. Behind production and occasional co-host is Tate Claggett. Our director of marketing is Max Bayevsky, and our music is produced by Pranav Vaidyanathan. Thank you for listening, and see you soon.